Good day, everyone. I'm your host, James Hicks from Hicks New Media. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives in Focus, where we highlight the people, industries, and technology that are making positive strides within society today. My guest today is Jenny Morehead. Jenny Morehead is the CEO of Flex HR, which is a full HR firm based out of the Midwest, East Coast. I don't know, something like that. We'll figure it out when we talk about it
Yeah,
later.
perfect. You
Uh,
can give us both to us. I
there
like
it is,
it.
right? They customize plans for all of their clients with services ranging from administration, regulatory compliance, payroll, recruiting, etc. Along with her role at Flex HR, Jenny is an entrepreneur, sales and marketing expert, and an independent board member who prides herself on building strong teams that exceed expectations for their clients. In her spare time, huh? She's an author and a co-author. She's actually written a book, CEO from Home, and the co-author of Make Your Business Social. Today, we are going to talk about an interesting concept. So we're going to talk about how employers can keep employees motivated, and also reverse how the employees can maintain that motivation as well. And with this new advent of hybrid work, lockdown, things of that nature, this concept that's been called quiet quitting. Let's talk about that, folks. You ready? Suck on the other side. Ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer Morehead, Jenny Morehead. I'll get it right.
Hi.
Jenny, how you doing today?
Good. It's great to be on the show. Thank you, James, for having me.
Listen, no, thank you. And the pleasure is all mine. And my community is going to have an amazing session as well. Just hearing some context in terms of the things that you want to offer. I gave a little 35,000 foot pitch overview of who you are and kind of what it is that you do. And hope you weren't offended when I said in your spare time. There's so much, right? You've got 24 hours a day, and you're using 23 of them, which is pretty good.
Oh,
Uh, but I always like for have the individual tell kind of their origin story. So if you don't mind telling my community and the audience who's watching and listening, either now or on the replay, who Jenny Morehead is and why you are a subject matter expert, why you are kind of a trusted advisor from the perspective of the conversation that we're going to have.
sure, thank you. My background is in sales and marketing. I worked in radio sales, in media sales, and in AM radio sales, right? And this was in the early 2000s. This wasn't in 1940 or 1950 when radio sales were, AM radio sales were big. It was, right when there were a lot of other competitive medias. Now, it was a great radio station. It was WGN Radio, operated by the Tribune Company here in the Chicago area. And I did that for 2.5 years and was promoted to be a sales manager. And so I managed people much older than me at 26 years old. That was my first management experience. And then, over the last 20 years, have managed people throughout a lot of different places. So I did that for a period of time. And then I started my own sales and marketing company called Sales Boxer. And I sold that in the beginning of 2020 as I was trying to look for a different type of company to buy, a different type of industry to get into. And HR and payroll outsourcing was really interesting to me because I had the sales background. I felt like as an entrepreneur, I had a lot of HR on the ground HR experience that I had used as an entrepreneur.
Mm.
Hiring people, motivating people, doing the compliance issues, the regular compliance things. And so I found a wonderful company called Flex HR based in Atlanta, even though I'm in Chicago. And its original founder is still with us. He's wonderful. I consider him a partner. And he's our chief HR officer and founder, Jim Sachansky. And so now we're co-located in Chicago and Atlanta and growing like a weed. We have a lot of growth behind us over the last couple of years, and as we look forward to the next few years as well at Flex HR. So that's my background. I really consider myself, a sales and management expert primarily, and then secondarily as an HR expert.
Okay, okay, and I appreciate you that context because again, that kind of sets up kind of some of the dialogue and the conversation that I want to have with you here. Um, Keeping employees motivated that's tough, right? That
Mhm.
that that just in and of itself conjures up many thoughts in terms of how and why and who owns that responsibility. So keeping employees motivated. Your thoughts on that? Because when I say that and when I add that little extra sentence in, I never think that an external person or entity can actually motivate me, right?
Mhm.
I think that I have to be motivated. I have to be the self starter. I have to be the one who wants to do X, Y, or Z, as opposed to you offering me more money, you offering me more PTO, personal time off, whatever the
Mhm.
case may be. As an external entity,
Mhm.
I personally put the onus on the individual themselves. But talk to me what your thoughts, again, coming from the HR profession and manager. You see where I'm about to take this conversation, right? We're
Mhm.
gonna have some interesting conversations. But how do you tackle that, right? In terms of how an organization can motivate their employees, primarily in
Right.
today's environment, right?
Right. Well, it is not surprising to hear you say that you are motivated from within. You're an entrepreneur, with your own business. And so I do think for employees out there, and right now it's a huge game to try to find, it's a
Mm,
huge competitive game to try to find employees because I do think entrepreneurship was something that wasn't always allowed for a lot of different people. And now it is. A lot of people can have their own side gig, they can be a consultant on their own, they can do a lot of things on their own. And so it's really turned everything on its side. I think,
hmm
well, there are a couple of trends that have come up, right? I think the baby boomers who, it was always going to be disruptive when they left the workforce and they started leaving in
Yeah.
2010. But then in 2020, they left in droves. And instead of like a year's worth of baby boomers leaving, we probably had several years worth of baby boomers leaving. The other thing that happened is that because of this shortage of employees, I mean, there's a shortage in employees to look after kids for women to go to work and
hmm
men. Whoever the parent is who needs to be at home caring for the kid, that hourly rate went up from 15 or $20 an hour. Now, it's being seen at $30 an hour. So
Wow.
there's really an assessment going on by people like, can I even go to the office? No, like I can't go. Or can I go to the restaurant where I work? Or can I go to the hotel where I work? Or the factory where I work? And it's like, I can't. It's just not affordable. So I think there are all of these general trends going on there's a huge shortfall in the marketplace in general. So it's a war on talent. It's a competitive
Mm,
game that employers have to play to make sure they are attracting the right employees and then keeping them motivated. And someone like you who's an entrepreneur, you're going to be doing your own thing, but someone who wants to be an employee, I think it is um, really important for the manager, that person's manager, to understand their hot buttons, whether it is pay, whether it is growth, whether it is just leave me alone while
yeah.
I do
Yeah.
my work. I don't really want to be a part of meetings or in-person things. Um, so I think that's really critical. That's always been critical for managers to do, but it's increasingly critical because with this shortfall of employees, it's become very expensive to go through the recruitment process to find them when they do leave. And it's never good for a company to have that type of turnover.
Yeah.
So it's turned it all on its side for employers. I also think as a society, over the last 40 years, we've had this mentality of, and maybe I'll put it in the scope of a US society, we've had
Mm,
this mentality of, the customer is always right, the client is always right. And that was oftentimes at the sacrifice of the employee. It meant that we as a society could treat the working person poorly in certain cases. And that's completely gone away. Now it's like the employee is always right. It's fairly easy to get a client right now. It's hard to get an employee. And so if push comes to shove and there's an issue between a client and employee, the client is now the one to go, not the employee.
Hold on. Okay, so that's an interesting statement right there. But I want to go back to there was a concept that you mentioned: war on talent.
Hmm.
So everything you said was pretty cool too. But I want to get a clarification what you mean when you say war on talent, because I don't want to assume. I hate assumptions, but that's just an interesting statement that we made there, and I've never heard that mentioned before. Give me some context in terms of what you mean when you said that.
Sure. It means that, employees who have, always struggled, I think, to find a job or are worried about losing a job, that's gone away. And now employees have three or four potential employers coming
Mm,
after on
okay.
LinkedIn
Yeah.
or in other venues and saying, hey, we'll give you a job right now and it'll be a 20% increase of salary and we'll offer this much in PTO.
Mm.
And so it's been a huge shift in, what we know of as HR, because it was always based on here's a performance review that, we're going to give from the top down as an employer, saying at the end of the year, here are the things you did wrong for the
Right.
last,
Right.
and and we're probably not going to give you a raise and this and that, and it's just like that doesn't work anymore. It doesn't fly. If you're caught in the past, it just your employees will leave and you'll face pretty high turnover.
You get it. Okay. So okay. So now I'm not even gonna look at the questions that I had asked. Now we're just coming off this straight up the dome right now. So how do you, again, as a professional within human resources, human relations, deal with those new mentalities? And I keep calling them new mentalities, and I keep calling it that this new era, because again, after the world stopped for 3 years, right, and
Hmm.
after everyone worked from home in their sweatpants on Zoom, on Teams, whatever the case may be. It almost seems like that paradigm has shifted, and really the who's in control really almost turned into the employees, because we were actually making the decisions and calling the shots. I can be productive either at an office, I can be productive at my local coffee shop. All I need is an internet connection and a phone line, and I can do what it is that I do. So, how do
Hmm.
you now counsel an employee of a new employee coming in? Two things: a new employee coming into the workforce, and a seasoned employee. And I don't want to say an old person, but I'll say a seasoned person in the workforce now dealing with this hybrid workforce. And how does the employee keep that employee, how does the employer keep that employee motivated, right?
Hmm.
Knowing all of
Hmm.
these external circumstances and kind of this changing shift and paradigm of who I think really um, owns this conversation and owns this discussion. Because like you were saying, the performance review at the end of the year, yeah, we can't have that same type of a conversation like we had pre COVID era, right? It's a whole different conversation now. Your thoughts on that again? How do you do what it is that you do talking to employers?
Sure. I think, from a tactical standpoint in HR, signing people up for benefits or doing the deductions in the payroll or some of the nuts and bolts onboarding and filling out the W-4, the tactical pieces have stayed the same,
Mm,
right?
mm,
It's the strategic parts of HR, like the performance review and the manager training and the motivating of the employees and the culture development that has completely shifted. And I run into so many of our HR consultants and HR consultants out there who say, this is how we did it 15 years ago, and I have 30 years of HR experience. And it's completely out the window. And honestly, it's much better to have a perspective of an entrepreneur where you're earning your keep every single day. You are, getting to it every single day and proving yourself and proving your worth with these employers. So I think it's incredibly important right now to be very positive in your feedback. I think that's very important to the most recent generation who's entered the workforce. It's incredibly important in a hybrid environment or a remote environment to slow down your training. It has to go
mm.
really slow and be really repetitive. It's not that someone on the other end is dumb or that, they're lazy. It's just you have to slow it down. There are some things that are missed not being in a physical environment. There are some really huge advantages for being not in a physical environment and being remote, but you have to slow down training. I think you have to make that feedback really positive and really specific and say, I noticed this very specific thing about what you did, and this really contributes to your growth plan. At our company at Flex HR for our employees, and what I would recommend for other clients is that the manager and their direct report meet at least once a week or bi-weekly in a one-on-one meeting. And
Mm.
that's both for both of their goods, right? It's for both of their advantage. It's for them to check in, the manager to check in to make sure how's your work-life balance, what's been going on, or give them constructive feedback. I've noticed that this has happened. Nothing should be a surprise at the end of the year. And the performance reviews then that we do that are once a year, we relate back to our 5 core values at our company. And we let the employee do a self-evaluation, and then
Okay.
the manager can weigh in on that. And then it's an opportunity to talk about their overreaching goals for the next year. I think that's been a huge trend that's come up. We want to relate their personal lives with their professional lives, and how does it all kind of come together, and how does what you're doing pull into your overall life goals and what you want in your life for the years to come. Because you want to make sure that you're talking about how we want this company to be a part of your life, but it doesn't have to be the only part of your life. Whereas I think if we're sitting in
That's a good point.
1985, this was like
This was
the
it, right? Yeah.
thing you should be doing. Greed is good, right? And and I do think, the office environment is not that old. We haven't been doing the traditional Mad Men office environment really for that long as a society. So it's so odd that so many people are coming and saying, people need to be in the office. And I think it's so antiquated. There are so many tools out there like Teams and Zoom and productivity tools and communication tools like Slack and organization tools like Asana that you can do to make sure that your people are doing what they need to do. And if you set up those metrics correctly, you can see whether people are doing what they need to do. And for a lot of people, and not all, some people need the physical office environment, but a lot of people, this isn't necessarily an adult daycare, right, that we run. And
I
we
love
can
that.
all do our work and do it productively and do it, where we find joy in it, but do it in our homes where we can, enjoy a work-life balance that we might not be able to enjoy if we were driving across town. Now, I think that's different. I live in a large urban area in
Mm.
Chicago. We're also based in Atlanta. Those cities have huge traffic issues, and people will drive great distances, which is crazy to me, to sit at a desk. Now, I think for regional cities, I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. It's 250,000 people. You
Mm.
can get to work in 10 minutes. And it has always, I think, in those regional cities, there's always been a nice work-life balance baked in where you truly work from 9 to 5. I think in some urban environments, those hours really got stretched and extended. So I think it depends on the industry. It depends on the type of city that you're in,
Mm.
where you're these shifts to, the employee really demanding what they want to, and the employee gets to demand that the numbers are on their side.
Are you seeing and having this conversation? Is it easier to articulate this type of a conversation about this different work environment, this different work mode, based on um, age demographic? Right. Are you seeing kind of the younger folks coming out of college right now still, I mean, just firing on all cylinders, want to go out there and tackle everything, take over the world, and do the good work, which is admirable, but where they're willing to use all 24 hours at the office, knocking it out, doing whatever. Whereas you see folks who have been around the block a couple of times, gone through a couple of layoffs, been fired, been transferred, been whatever the case may be, a little more seasoned in their workforce, right? Director level, senior level, whatever the case may be, understand the value of the work life balance, understand the value of the total compensation piece, right? You take something home, but then from a compensation perspective, you've got other things. You got that PTO, you've got a company car, you've got uh, free dry cleaning, whatever, all of those other things that matter. We talked about Northern California and San Francisco, that area. Listen, a lot of the companies within my industry, yeah, you get what you get to take home, but free Uber and free Lyft credits, listen, that's worth its weight in gold right there, right? And so those kinds of things start mattering. And I just wonder if when you have conversations with the individual employee, is it easier for them to have that aha moment of, yeah, this matters from a work life balance perspective with the newer folks coming into the workforce or folks who have already been in the workforce for a number of years?
Yeah, I think so. People, I'll kind of divide it like 35 plus, right? 35 years old and older. They have been trained in some capacity. They've been trained usually in an office environment, which is because that's what we were all used to doing. I think a fairly good training area. They might have very entrenched social environments where they don't need the office. And so I think they might be more inclined to want that remote work and be really excited about some of the remote work perks that might come up. But I've seen it that, the newest generation to come out of school, up to 35, they might need that social structure of an office environment. You do get trained, I think, easier and quicker in an office environment. You get to make deeper friendships in an office environment. I do think that that is the case, and not just office. If you're a teacher in a school, or if you're a police officer in a police department, there are some industries that this is just not a
Yeah.
capability or, something that you could have. However, when I talk to those younger people, I think they've seen the the negative results of that go all out type of mentality with their parents. I think they
Hmm.
saw divorce. I think they saw the effect that it had on our environment, driving 2 hours each way to work and what that does to our environment. That kind of, I don't care what it costs, I'm going to be there at my desk. That has gone away. No one
Yeah.
feels that way, right, anymore. And so I think the youngest generation, they're excited to work. They want to show their value, but they're also very aware of the cost that that work has. And so they're not going to work, 80 hours a week. They're going to do their 40 hours a week, and they're going to create some good value. But I think they're very aware of like mental health issues and accommodations that they might need in their work environment. They might do hybrid, but they recognize that it's nice to have maybe a day or two, if they can get it, at home per week. So I think, and they're not afraid to ask for it. They're not afraid to ask for what the
I agree.
salary
I've seen that too.
for their
Yeah.
benefits. And I think employers get very concerned because it's been so formal, and we are the ones to be respected, and that's just not the case anymore. And you can't approach it like that anymore if you want the best talent force that you can get. And I think it's very easy to be like, the age old thing of, the newest generation, yada, yada, yada. But that's always been
That's
said.
always,
And
yeah, that's always been every decade, right? Every time we go around, it's been said that way. Okay, that
right.
that is good, right? And I appreciate you saying, and I do, I love and I see the attentiveness, the the ability and the willingness to speak up, right, for this next generation that's coming up. I think we as the older, I'm gonna say the seasoned older, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna be okay, right? When these 18, 19, 20 some years old come and take over the world, I think we're gonna be all right. So I really love to hear also just from the fact that you see that as well, and you speak that into existence. What you've already said, you utilize some of those practices at Flex HR, but you're you're walking the walk that you actually talk, right? You're
Yes.
utilizing those types of policies and procedures in house as well. And as you talk to your clients about understanding the value of work life balance, understanding the value of uh, do all you can, while you can, what you're doing, but don't forget to take care of yourself, right? These mental health and these mental awareness conversations are real. And we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing too many instances where folks are flaming out, burning out, and harming themselves or whatever the case may be. And we really can't address those ahead of time. And it's comforting to hear someone in your role, in your position, and your level of authority having that conversation with the
Mhm.
employers and the employees. So um,
Mhm.
now let's.
Absolutely. And even prospective clients, we've doubled in revenue in 2 years. A lot because people can't find the employees to do the HR and payroll work. And, we do that for them on their behalf. But I don't live on some, secluded island with employees that will just, take harassment by clients or be treated cruelly. I am under the same situation where I need to make sure they find joy in their work and that, what is given is reciprocated from the client. And so we have to educate the client a lot on we're not a normal vendor. You're going to be integrating and working with, the person on my team each and
Mm,
every day. And it's a very intimate relationship. And so it is my responsibility. And I do this. I was meeting with a client that could have been very large for us, and I had met two different times with them. And, after 2 hours of my time doing a full discovery phase and understanding their needs, I told them, that we weren't the right fit.
mm,
And you have to have enough gumption to stand up to it, even when it could be really interesting from a revenue standpoint, to look down the road and say, this isn't going to be good for my employees. I would have someone quit, and then, and I can't sacrifice that person right now. I can see this happening. I can see the antagonism coming from this person and this kind of entitlement, like whatever we need, you should just bow down and do for us. And that just, it doesn't fly anymore. It
yeah.
simply doesn't. And, heading into 2023, if you're looking for, certain types of relationships, you can't be like the client that you always thought that you could be, where, whatever I want is what is given to me. It just simply isn't. It doesn't happen anymore.
That see, and that's so telling, right? And appreciate you telling that insider story as well, because again, that paradigm is shifting, right? And for my community, so I kind of I'll preface this as well. My community, and I appreciate everyone coming in with comments and things of that nature. They're primarily biz tech entrepreneurs, folks that are also looking at financial tech types of scenarios. So the fact that you mentioned that every opportunity may not be a good opportunity to embark on for your company, yeah, it could be a nice influx of revenue, could be a nice influx of activity, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't match with your goals, your mission, your direction, your strategy, if that doesn't match and if that doesn't mix, and if you're going to have more negativity as opposed to positivity from your internal team for taking on this extra work or this extra activity, this may not be a good situation to embark on, even though you could have used that invoice.
Right.
You could have done something pretty nice with that book of business. You could have had that new logo on your website, but at the end of the day, there was something about it that just didn't match with, again, your mission, your business morality compass, and you decided to step away from that. That right there is hard to do, especially for smaller entrepreneurs, especially for uh, employers looking to maintain their operations and things of that nature. So we'll get into the quiet quitting thing in a second, but I really want to dive into that. Talk about how you made that decision, though, right? Again, the strength to actually make that decision. Yeah, you could have just gone and in front of your company, had a conference meeting, and said, "We're going to do this. Buckle in, put your seatbelts on. We're going to do this anyway." But again, talk about where that leadership, that mentality came from to say, this looks good on paper, but in all actuality and in practice, this isn't good for Flex HR.
Right. Well, I think you have to have this feeling when you're running a business that, first of all, the best place for your worst clients is with your competition. That is, if you have, your worst client and they end up leaving you, that's fine because they probably slowed you down and they were unprofitable. And so you have to be comfortable with that in your sales effort too, in bringing on clients, because employees are at such a premium. And so you're convincing them to work with you. You're also convincing them to work with the clients that you have as part of the portfolio. Now, this is our particular type of business. Now, very specifically and in a granular level, when I'm meeting with a client, it's all about expectation alignment, right? So here are your expectations, and here's what we're going to do for you, and maybe even more, right? Now, if that expectation level is way out of whack, we're never going to end up meeting or even exceeding your expectations. And that's just going to be a painful experience, from the very beginning. And we really like to have people sign on for 12 months and work with us for at least a year because it takes that long to really learn their systems, to operate as their HR and their payroll group. And so, especially when I hear clients coming to me and, they kind of think, well, an HR manager and a payroll manager does all of this. And I hear these owners saying, well, and we're going to actually step back and just have you take over. That is such a red flag to me. And it's so crazy how people put that on HR and payroll because it's like, no, 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 that's a whole different pricing conversation. And I want equity in your business and I want to be paid like an owner. Right now, you're paying us to be your HR and payroll outsource manager, right?
We need
Like
to
that
have some
doesn't,
more conversations, right? Yeah, and we need
right. That's a whole
to.
different conversation. And so I evaluate that and I also evaluate the level of liability that we would be coming in
Mm,
on. If it's been managed for the last 20 years, that's hard. That's hard to come in on. And so there are some different factors that I look at. But I think for, a wide ranging group of industries and for your audience to know, I mean, the best place for your worst clients is with your competition. And it's hard. It's hard to say no, but you just have to put yourself in that place down the line in 6 months or 8 months when you've lost a really good employee because they've been mistreated by this one client. And was it worth it? It never is.
man, that right there is worth its weight in gold, right there. I hope folks capture that right there. I wrote that down as you were saying that, so that's good stuff. Your worst client is their best places with your competitors. Um, all right, so
Yeah.
now let's get into this concept that I wanted to talk to you about while I still have you for a little bit. We've talked about keeping employees motivated. We've talked about employer actions for working to keep employees motivated. Talked about the employee themselves. From my perspective, again, has to have that motivation amongst themselves. But if they don't, there is this concept called quiet quitting, which is starting to bubble near the surface and be the new hashtag.
Mhm.
I hate it because I hate what it is because again I hate folks that mail it in. Right. If
Mhm.
you're going to make a commitment to an organization, if you're going to make a commitment to a team or whatever the case may be, show up and do your
Mhm.
job. Right. That kind of thing. The old Bill Belichick, do your job. But
Mhm.
talk to me about what you are seeing and your thoughts as it relates to this concept of quiet quitting and how you being an HR professional and within this industry, how you can get around that or help squelch that
Mhm.
and turn folks from being complacent, primarily again working remotely possibly and not being physically in front of an office, not sitting next to their manager, and not using the time of their workday as effectively as possibly and instead focusing or locking in something else. So this concept of quiet quitting, are you seeing this more in your discussions with employers and employees?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing it. And I think it is not just the no call, no show that we had in the
Hmm.
past, but quiet quitting is also being considered to explain someone who's not trying their hardest, who's giving just the basic level. And also, and I think this is the hardest part to uncover, but might have, two different full time jobs that they're working from home. I
Wow.
think that's the trickiest part to
Wow.
uncover, actually. And so I think from an employer perspective or from an owner perspective, whether you're just if you're the hiring manager or you're the owner, you always have to have a good bench, right? You're always
Yeah.
recruiting, you're always selling. So you always have to have a nice bench because that helps you feel more confident about, giving the performance improvement plan to the person to really identify, we're not seeing this level of performance. This is what's identified in your job description. This is what's identified in our handbook that you signed off on. This is what's in the offer letter for what we expected of you. And we're not seeing that, and here's how we want to turn this around. Here's how we want to improve that. So
Hmm.
it's nice to give them that, feedback and give you that time, to find someone, to potentially find someone, because also, people can get that negative feedback and run. So you have to be ready once you give that negative feedback to kind of have someone waiting in the wings, I think is the best way. But terminate quickly, especially if you're a small business. You can't afford it because your A players are so important as a small company. If you have only 10 people on your team, 20 people, 30 people, you see that level of non-commitment very quickly and very easily. And so you have to not be afraid of terminating, and you terminate quickly so that that gets out of there because it infects everyone, and not only, if they are not just a, complacent worker, but also a toxic worker, you
Yes.
don't want that. It's not good. It's not good for you. It's not worth it. And I think a lot of employers get so nervous about it. And it's about having the backup. It's showing, these are the things that in writing that we've done and the performance improvement plan. But then it's just talking in a very non-personal way. And this is the advice that we give to
That's it
employers.
right there.
It's saying, this is your last day at this company. We're going to talk to you about the next steps, and you just leave it at that. And, return your computer. We wish you the best. It's not the right fit, but this is your last day here. And it doesn't get into a lot of personal issues, and it just breathes in new life because you can bring in someone different who doesn't have that mentality. I think there are certain things that you can do for employees to motivate. You can kind of move around their role or have them kind of cross train. You can make sure they're seeing how they could grow in the organization if they want that, or if they want to just kind of stay where they are and make their money and go home at night. Reinforce that. You have to find their hot buttons in order to really push them. And some of your A players, they're going to want to be pushed and pushed and pushed. But some of your other players, they just might be fine doing what they want to do. And if it works for your organization, that's great. But
That's
if
a good point.
it's
There
the
you go.
level of complacency, that you can't handle, especially if you're a smaller company, you have to terminate quickly.
That's huge, right? And when you went through the sentence there, say this is your last day and take your laptop, I almost started sweating like, oh, did Jenny just fire me? Because you did it so smooth. I'm like, oh, I guess we're done. But no, I'll pack my bags and shut down here. But the fact that you said, right, do it fast, do it quickly, terminate quickly, that way it actually doesn't become personal. Because if you wait too long, if you're trying to get too uh, friendly, if you're trying to be too accommodating to the the laggards, right, to the ones who aren't actually helping the bottom line, who aren't being positive, who are fostering a toxic environment, that's when you as the employer also become kind of involved and intertwined in that, and it gets harder. From my perspective, I've only had to fire two people in my time, but it gets harder to go through with that action, right? If you do
Mhm.
it quickly, if you focus on the main, stay focused on the main task, and focus on the organization, keep the A plus players locked in, doing what they do, doing it the right way, and the ones that just want to do what they have to do and fly below the radar, but still be positive citizens to the organization. Keep them happy, keep them right. But the ones that are falling off the wayside, I like what you said. Yet terminate quickly, move on. Don't take it personal because the conversation really is as quick as it was just now. It's a 3 minute conversation. The person will lay their head down and mope, but then they're out the door, and then you move on,
Yeah.
right? And then it's if we didn't as the individual, the employer internalize it so much, make it personal, it would actually be a more constructive conversation and could actually be a learning experience for the person who's being moved out or moved around or whatever the case may be. That's my soapbox right there. I'll stop now.
Yeah, no, but I get it. I think, we all have started businesses because we care about people and building teams. And
Yeah.
so that's part of it. And so I've spoken in different business school classes. And, I think when you're younger, you kind of have this thought, I got the feedback, she's so heartless. Seemed so easy for her to terminate. But you're also, as an owner and even a hiring manager, you have some fiduciary responsibilities to the
Yes.
organization, right? Like,
Yes.
you need to keep it afloat. You need to keep it going. You need to keep the people who are motivated and playing for the team, excited and getting raises. And in order to do that, you have to show, like, your work is meaningful. And when people don't pull their weight, they leave. And
That
I
is
think
true.
it's really important to show that, like, I'm not afraid of this. I'm not afraid of someone who doesn't perform or refuses to perform. You can try your best to motivate them. But if you see that kind of, that quiet quitting attitude, or you kind of sense that they might have a different job going or different priorities, like, are they at lunch just for like 4 hours every day? You can tell and you can see, and it doesn't take that long if you really dig in. And then it just has to be eliminated from the organization.
I love it. I love it. Get some comments coming in. They're not posting up on within the studio, but I'll read them as well because they were interesting to what we were just talking about. Cheryl said you must excise the toxic people quickly and respectfully. Love that comment right there. And then Coffee Talk and Text says it's about not feeling you're being taken advantage of. I
Hmm.
like that. I
I
like
agree
that.
with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you shouldn't. If you have really good intentions for your organization and for your people, there is no one who should take advantage of that. Who's
There
on
you
your
go.
team, who you're signing a paycheck for, that's ridiculous. And so if you feel like that's the case, it just doesn't have a place. And you have to
And
be fair in that assessment, but it just doesn't have a place.
doesn't have a place. And here's a good instance from employer and employee perspective. Dr. Elo is saying, but you can learn from each opportunity and make it a positive learning experience. So again, the person that's being moved around, shuffled out, whatever the case may be, they can learn from the experience, and then the employer themselves can also learn from how this went down and how maybe to alleviate and to avoid that type of situation moving forward. So great comments coming in from the community. And I know the folks that were responding there, they are also in the same situation, right? Entrepreneurs, business owners who are growing their teams and may need to have this type of a conversation with someone, right? As they
Mhm.
grow, as they have folks coming in to help them with their overall objectives, you want to bring in the right folks. You want those folks to do well because the company does well, everyone does well. You get a couple of nickels in your bank account, you can buy them those Christmas gifts. But if you're not contributing, how do we have that conversation quickly to either get you back on track and or find another opportunity for you so we can all be successful down the road? So, thank you guys for chiming in with that. Uh, yeah, quiet quitting is just it'll be in the dictionary next year, right? It'll be like the 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 word or the phrase, the hashtag of the year probably next year. And if we don't squelch it, if we
Yeah.
allow it to fester and allow it to grow. So that's good
Yeah,
stuff.
I think it's definitely a result of, more remote work and more
Yeah.
hybrid work, and, you're not in the office. Although this did and has always existed with no call, no show, that mentality. It's just, I think, taken on a new trendy name.
Hmm.
And it did happen in office environments too, right? People just were done with work and they weren't going to show up anymore, or they weren't, pitching in and giving their all. But it can be done, like you're ghosting someone, or,
Yeah.
it can be done very quietly. And I think we've learned as a society, that we can do things like without being direct. And I don't know if that's necessarily good, but I definitely think it's the trend. And, we work with clients all the time, they start at like their first 10 employees and, they haven't done a handbook, but it didn't matter, right? Because it was like everyone who was hired for, to really help grow the business. And the original founder brought them on, and it was like a family environment. And then it gets a little bit more sticky with the next 10 hires and the following 10 hires and the following 10 after that, right? And you need to scale as an organization, but you do need to build the proper framework for it. Put that org chart together. And 30 years ago, people might wait 5 or 10 years for a promotion. That doesn't happen anymore, right? So you need to make areas in your org chart where, there are these kind of mini promotions that go on, or extra responsibilities that you can keep people motivated, right? They need to be seeing some salary advancement or promotion type activities kind of now every 1 to 3 years, 1 to 5 years. By no means can it really be 5 to 10 years anymore, unless you have someone who's really set to say, I like what I'm doing, I'm very happy. But for people who want to grow in the organization, you have to find ways now as the leader to do that, and to identify the org chart, and to talk with your people about, this is what we look like
Mm,
now. This is
hmm.
what we're going to look like in 2 years. This is what we're going to look like in 5 years. And to build that handbook to show, like, this is what we value as an organization, and this is what we put together as our standards of work. Because what bites people is, after those first 10 people who are so loyal to the owner and the founder, and then even like the first 20, as you're growing and scaling and it's getting bigger and getting bigger, all of a sudden they're looking around and they're like, wait, what? Like, we had someone who totally took advantage of us. Why did this happen? And there
Yeah.
is a reason why this
Wow.
happened, because there was no framework or no kind of rules of work that we had set up, or maybe no org chart that said very specifically, this is your manager, and we need to have one-on-ones that make sure that we're on top of your work and on top of your performance.
Man, listen, folks, you hear Jenny Morehead right there talking, and I was scrolling through the website, so everything you just said is bullet pointed here on your website in terms of, again, if the individual, if the owner, if the entrepreneur, if the business, if that person isn't comfortable or isn't ready, I mean, maybe even to have those types of conversations, doesn't know how, right? We don't know how to do everything. We're entrepreneurs, we're generalists, right? We know a little bit about everything, but
Yes.
we're not necessarily specialists. So having folks like you, having an organization like FlexR to come in, and again, the list of services as I was going through here, right? Tell folks, if they're looking for assistance, if they're looking for guidance in terms of how to have those types of conversations, how to maybe write those SOPs, those standard operating procedures, how to prepare for that awkward conversation of maybe moving someone around or someone out of the organization. How can they get in touch with Jenny Moorhead and the Flex HR team?
Oh,
Little
well,
plug for Flex.
thank you. Thank you so much. So, flexhr.com, we've been around for over 21 years. We take such pride in what we do. And so we do HR outsourcing, payroll outsourcing, HR consulting, payroll tax work. And I would say, because this is a lot of entrepreneurs in this audience, a lot of tech folks, I think it's very easy as an entrepreneur. And I get this mentality because I'm the same way. You're like 100% towards revenue and growth and scaling. And so these compliance matters, and the payroll tax things that you get from the government, you're like, does this really matter? I don't think so. And it actually does. It's very important. And so, if it's not, we'd love for you to come to Flex HR, and we can line you up with someone at a bare minimum who just works with you, on a per hour basis when you need it, to come help you. But if you don't work with us, try to find someone in your circle who could give you that type of advice early on. The employee handbook is really critical to set you up for success as an employer, because you can have employees that come and, hey, I spoke with an employment lawyer and you're supposed to do XYZ and you're not. And all of a sudden you have a lawsuit on your hand. And that's not what you need. You don't want to end up like that. So it is important to talk to someone who knows so that you can make sure to protect yourself, even in the offer letter. We really talk about like when you're giving that annual or that compensation level, we like to see employers give the compensation per pay period, not for the
Mm,
annual amount. Because then when someone leaves in February and they might come with an employment lawyer to say, hey, you owe me this full amount, you guaranteed it in the offer letter. So these types of things are meant to protect you as an employer, and they're easy to cast aside and say, I'm going to deal with it later. And I get that, and I get that mentality. But seek someone out, seek an expert. We'd love to be your expert, but if you have someone in your circle who's trusted, go to them just so it protects you.
love it. Love it. That is golden information. Cheryl is in the comments saying, she says, when I was an HR executive, I wish I had the resources like Flex HR. So there we go. Bringing value to the audience and to the community right there. Jenny Morehead, listen, this is good stuff. This is timely as well because again, I just fall back on just the time of the year, time of just society as well. Again, since the 3 years that we were locked down, and folks getting into a different mindset, maybe shifting, maybe taking their eye off of the goal, getting a little complacent in their roles and things like that. And it's a good just stopgap to have the conversation again for the employer and for the employee about bringing value to an organization. And if there needs to be a change, then there needs to be a change. But let's have that conversation. Let's have that conversation sooner than later, as you're saying. Don't let it fester, and whatever type of changes need to happen, let's do that. But again, this is one of those awkward conversations that probably doesn't happen until it's too late a lot of times, and that's when you start hearing it on the news that this company has fallen by the wayside or this employee has fallen by the wayside. But I think it matters to have people like you and people like Flex HR out there doing that diligence ahead of time to kind of counteract some of that
Hmm.
stuff. So I thank you for the opportunity to have you on the show, and I thank you for your time and your expertise in this particular field.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Then you have a great day. And folks, if you found some value in this, please share it with someone, and I will talk to everyone soon. Be well.